They're not coming back. That's the first thing she said to him. No hello, no tears, just those 4 words. Flat, lifeless, like she'd already accepted it. Eric froze. He had just pulled over, engine still running, after spotting a small figure sitting at the edge of the sidewalk like she'd been dropped there and forgotten. A little black girl, barely 7, wrapped in an oversized hoodie with ripped sneakers and dirt smudged across her cheeks. No backpack, no adult in sight. It didn't make sense. The morning had already been a mess. His alarm didn't go off. He spilled coffee in the car, and traffic was backed up for miles. But all of that disappeared the second he saw her. Something in her stillness. It wasn't normal. It wasn't a tantrum or a kid running away for attention. She looked like someone who'd given up. Eric got out of the car and walked over cautiously, unsure what to expect. "Are you okay?" he asked. That's when she looked up, met his eyes, and said it. "They're not coming back. No fear, no drama, just a quiet truth from someone far too young to be speaking in absolutes." He crouched down, trying to hold himself steady. "Who's not coming back?" "My mom. My dad." I waited, but I knew. There was something chilling in how she said it. Like, this wasn't the first time she'd been left, just the first time it had gone this far. He asked her name. She hesitated, then said, "Amara." And in that moment, Eric knew he couldn't just walk away. He called the police, sat with her until they came. She didn't say much after that, just rested her chin on her knees and stared down the road like she was waiting for it to disappear. When the officers arrived, she stood up without protest. No questions, no crying, just silence. Before she got into the car, she turned back once, just once, and looked at Eric. That look never left him. For a few days he tried to push it away, told himself he'd done the right thing, that she was safe now, that the system would take care of her. But the truth? He couldn't stop thinking about her, not for a single day. He called Child Protective Services. They confirmed she'd been placed in a temporary shelter. That was it. No details, no updates. It felt cold, too cold, like she was a box on a form someone had checked and moved on from. Eric didn't move on. He called again, and again. Then he started researching, asking questions, visiting offices. It wasn't that he had some grand plan, he just couldn't let go of that feeling, that maybe, somehow, she had been dropped into his life for a reason. Eventually, he learned she'd been moved to a foster home, not permanent, just temporary placement. That's when the idea first hit him. It sounded insane at first. He was single, worked in tech, had 0 parenting experience. But still, he went online, printed out the forms, and started the process of becoming a foster parent. It took weeks, home inspections, background checks, interviews where people asked him if he was ready for the emotional toll. He lied and said yes. He wasn't, not really, but he knew what was worse. Doing nothing when he was finally approved to visit her. He didn't know what to expect. Would she even remember him? Would she talk to him? She did neither. When he entered the foster home, she was sitting on the floor with some crayons. She glanced up, then looked away. No smile, no words. He sat beside her quietly. "I came back," he said. That made her pause. Just for a second. He visited again the next week, then the next. Sometimes they colored. Sometimes they didn't speak at all. It didn't matter. He just wanted her to know he was there, and he wasn't leaving. Slowly, she started to open up. She told him about her house, how it had always been loud, her parents fighting, breaking, things, leaving for days at a time. One day, she woke up and the house was silent. She waited, but they never came back. "I wasn't scared," she said once, her voice quiet. "Just tired. I knew they were done with me." Eric didn't know how to respond, so he didn't. He just listened. Then, one day, she laughed. It was small and quick and caught him completely off guard. But it was real. He'd said something stupid about her drawing a dog with 5 legs, and she laughed. That moment changed everything. He knew then this wasn't charity. This wasn't pity. He was already in too deep. And Amara. She was finally beginning to trust someone. What neither of them knew then was how deep this story would go. Because this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. What started as a gut reaction on a gray morning had turned into something deeper, something he hadn't expected, something he didn't even have words for yet. All he knew was that every time he left that foster home, something pulled at him, a quiet gravity, like a thread connecting him to that little girl who still barely spoke, still kept her guard up, but who no longer looked away when he walked in. Amara was beginning to trust him. It wasn't obvious. She didn't suddenly cling to him or ask for hugs. It was subtle, the way she'd move a little closer when they sat on the floor, or how she'd quietly slide a crayon his way without looking up, inviting him to draw with her. It was in the rare questions she asked. Do you like dogs? What's your favorite color? Questions so small they might have meant nothing to someone else, but to Eric, they were everything. Then came the day that changed the pace of everything. He'd just arrived for his usual visit when the social worker pulled him aside. Her face was tight, unreadable, and she spoke in a low voice as if afraid Amara might hear. They're moving her again. Eric blinked. What? Why? They're closing this placement. The foster mothers had some personal issues come up. It's nothing to do with Amara. It's just the system. He felt the floor shift beneath him. Where's she going? We're trying to find space, she said, not meeting his eyes. But most of the group homes are full, right? Now, something sharp twisted in his chest. The thought of her being shuffled into another strange house, another unfamiliar bed, another room where she had to start over, again, made him feel sick. I want to take her in, he said suddenly, before he even realized the words had left his mouth. The social worker hesitated. You're still in the approval process. I'll finish it, today, whatever it takes. I'll do it. It didn't happen in a day, of course. Bureaucracy never moves that fast. But something in his voice, maybe the urgency, maybe the sincerity, must have landed, because by the end of the week, he was told to prepare a room. That night. He stood in the guest bedroom of his apartment and just stared. The walls were bare. The sheets were new but colorless. It looked more like a hotel room than a place a child could call home. So he spent the weekend driving from store to store, buying little things that reminded him of Amara. Markers, sketch, pads, a nightlight shaped like a dog, even though he didn't know if she liked dogs or was afraid of them. He wanted her to have something. Anything. The day she moved in was quiet. There were no tears, no smiles. She stepped into his apartment with the same calm expression she wore when she'd sat alone on that sidewalk, as if she'd learned not to react too quickly because things never lasted. He showed her the room. She didn't say much. Just walked in, sat on the bed, and looked around like she was waiting for it to disappear. For the first few days, they were like two people trying to live in the same space without bumping into each other. She was careful, quiet. She never asked for anything, never made a mess. But every now and then, Eric would catch her looking at him, not with suspicion, but curiosity, like she was still trying to figure out who he really was, why he hadn't left yet. Then, one night, something shifted. Eric was in the kitchen making dinner. Spaghetti, because it was the only thing he could make without burning, and he heard a soft voice behind him. Can I help? He turned, surprised, and found her standing there, tiny hands clasped in front of her. She looked unsure, but present, wanting, in some small way, to connect. They made dinner together that night. She stirred the sauce while he boiled the pasta, and they talked. Not about anything big, Just little things. How she liked apples but hated bananas. How she used to draw on the walls when no one was looking. Eric listened to every word like it was sacred. And when she laughed, actually laughed, a full, unfiltered sound, it felt like hearing music after years of silence. But with that laughter came something else. Pain. Later that night, as she sat on the couch watching cartoons, she suddenly asked, "Why do people leave?" The question came out of nowhere, and it hit Eric like a punch to the chest. He didn't have a clean answer. He didn't know what truth to offer that wouldn't break, something delicate inside her. So he did the only thing he could. He told her the truth. "Sometimes people leave because they don't know how to stay," he said softly. "It's not because of you. It's not your fault. It never was." She didn't respond right away, but she nodded, and a few minutes later she leaned over, just slightly, and rested her head on his arm. That was the first night she fell asleep on the couch beside him. The next few weeks moved in waves. Some days were warm, filled with smiles, conversations, even a trip to the park. Other days, she barely spoke. There were nightmares sometimes when she'd wake up crying but pretend she wasn't. Eric never pushed her. He just sat by her bed until she calmed down, sometimes holding her hand until sleep came back. Then came the twist neither of them saw coming. A letter from someone claiming to be Amara's aunt. A woman named Tanya who lived 2 states away. She'd only recently found out what happened. She wanted custody. Eric read the letter twice, his hands trembling. He didn't know this woman, didn't know her intentions. But the law didn't care how many dinners they'd shared or how many nights he'd sat by her bed. Blood was blood. And if this woman passed the checks, if she was approved, Amara would have to go. He looked toward the bedroom door where Amara was sketching in her notebook, humming a soft tune under her breath. And he felt the cold shadow of loss creeping in again. The very same feeling he'd seen in her eyes the first time they met. This time, he wasn't sure he could handle it either. Eric couldn't sleep that night. He lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, hearing the quiet creaks of the apartment settle around him. But all he could think about was that letter. Tanya. A stranger, claiming to be Amara's aunt, suddenly appearing after months of silence. Where was she when Amara was left alone? Why now? Why not when it mattered most? He knew how the system worked. If Tanya passed the background checks, had a stable job, a home, and no red flags, then legally she had every right to take Amara. The court wouldn't ask about shared dinners, whispered bedtime stories, or late-night drawings taped to the fridge. They wouldn't care that Amara had finally started to feel safe, or that she'd stopped flinching when someone raised their voice on the television. They would look at the facts, the paperwork, blood ties, and that thought made Eric feel like he was running out of time. The next morning, he watched Amara eat her cereal across the kitchen table. She was humming again, some little tune she'd made up herself, and tapping the side of the bowl with her spoon. Carefree, light, a child, being a child. And for the first time in a long time, she looked like she belonged somewhere. He didn't tell her about the letter. Not yet. Instead, he dropped her off at school and drove straight to the caseworker's office. He didn't ask for an appointment. He just showed up, pacing in the hallway until someone finally agreed to talk to him. "I'm not trying to be difficult," he said, trying to keep his voice calm. "But you have to understand. She's just starting to open up. She's just beginning to heal." The caseworker gave him that look, kind but distant, the look of someone who's heard this kind of desperation before. "We're not saying she'll be removed right away. We're still verifying Tanya's claims. But if she's family, and if she meets the requirements, it's standard protocol to prioritize reunification." Eric leaned forward, voice tight. She was abandoned, alone on a sidewalk. That little girl trusted no one. And now she finally feels safe. You want to take that away? She wouldn't be taken away, Eric. She'd be going to a relative, someone with a biological connection. That matters. He sat back, defeated. He knew it wasn't personal. The system was built to follow rules, but it still felt like the ground was shifting beneath him, like something precious was slipping through his fingers and there was nothing he could do to stop it. That night, Amara noticed something was off. They were sitting on the couch, her feet tucked under a blanket, watching a movie she'd picked out. She leaned against him, casually, like it had become second nature. Then, without even turning her head, she asked, "Are you mad at me?" Eric looked down. "What? No. Why would I be?" "You're quiet," she said, "like you're thinking something you don't want to say." He took a deep breath. He hadn't wanted to tell her yet. Not until he knew for sure, but hiding it didn't feel right anymore. "There's someone who says she's your aunt," he said slowly. "Her name is Tanya. She reached out. She might want to take care of you." Amara didn't respond. She just stared straight ahead. "Do you know her?" he asked. She shook her head. "No." "Do you remember your mom ever talking about her?" "No," she said again, softer this time. He waited, gave her time. After a few minutes, she finally whispered, "If I go with her, will you still come find me?" Eric's heart cracked open. "Amara," he said, turning to face her, "if there's even a chance you have a good relative out there, someone who truly wants to love you and take care of you, we'll find that out together. But I'm not going anywhere, ever. I need you to know that." She didn't cry. She didn't say anything. She just reached over and held his hand. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. Tanya's background came back clean. She'd never been arrested, had no history of abuse, lived in a small town 2 states away, worked at a local hospital, and had even fostered once before. On paper, she was a good option. Too good. Eric couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. One afternoon, while Amara was at school, he took a drive. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He just followed the address listed in Tanya's paperwork. It was a long, quiet road, the kind that made you feel like you were in the middle of nowhere. When he finally pulled up to the house, it looked fine, neat, well kept, but something about it felt staged. Too clean, too prepared. He knocked. A woman opened the door. "Tanya?" She blinked, surprised. "Yes?" "I'm Eric," he said. "I'm fostering Amara. I had some questions." She didn't invite him in, just stood in the doorway. "I didn't know about her," she said quickly. "Not until recently. My sister and we weren't close." Eric watched her closely. "Why do you want her now?" There was a pause. Her eyes flicked to the side. "She's family," she said simply. But Eric didn't believe her. He left without saying much more, but the pit in his stomach only grew. There was something in her voice. Not quite cold, but not warm either. No pictures of children in the house. No signs of a room being prepared. It felt hollow. Back home, Eric told the caseworker everything he'd seen, everything he felt. But gut feelings weren't evidence. The investigation continued. And Amara. She stayed quiet for days after he told her about the visit. She didn't laugh, didn't draw, just sat at the window sometimes, watching the world like she was bracing for it to change. Then, one night, she came into his room. She stood at the doorway, holding her stuffed dog in one hand, voice trembling. "I don't want to go." Eric sat up. "I know." She walked over, climbed into bed beside him, and whispered, "Please don't let them take me." He held her as tightly as he could, but he didn't know if he could keep that promise. Not yet. Not without a fight. Eric had never felt more helpless. Every morning now began with the same ache in his chest, the one that came from knowing time was running out. The court date was set, just 2 weeks away. That's when a judge would decide whether Amara stayed with him or left with a woman who had never once been part of her life until now. Tanya had passed all the checks. Clean. Record. Steady job. Her story looked right on paper, but something in Eric's gut screamed that it wasn't, and Amara. She was retreating again. The laughter that had once crept into her voice was gone. She no longer danced around the apartment barefoot like she used to. Her drawings, once full of color, had turned gray and rigid. Small houses with no windows, people with blank faces, always standing apart. She stopped eating cereal in the mornings, started flinching when the doorbell rang. She was bracing for the worst. So was he. One night, after putting her to bed, Eric sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the court notice on the table. It looked so official, so final, like it had already made up its mind. He ran his hands through his hair, frustrated, searching for some thread he hadn't pulled yet. He couldn't just sit back and let her be taken. He had to find something the courts would listen to. He opened his laptop and started digging. Anything about Tanya. Her social media, public records, old addresses. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. His eyes burned from the screen light, but he kept going. And then, buried in an old comment thread on a parenting forum, he found it, a woman named Carla, username Carla123mom, had posted 2 years ago about a negative experience fostering with Tanya Simmons. The post was short, a little vague, but the language stuck out. Too strict, too distant. Treated it like a job, not a calling. Eric's pulse quickened. He tracked the username back. No contact info, but there was an old blog link. He clicked. It. Dead page. But the domain led to an archived post. A short piece titled, "Why I Quit Fostering." There, in black and white, was a paragraph that made Eric sit up straight. Some people foster for the money, others for control. I learned that the hard way when I met Tanya Simmons. She followed every rule, but something in her eyes chilled me. No empathy, just management. It wasn't hard proof, but it was something. The next morning, he called his lawyer. They hadn't spoken in weeks, but now Eric had a new urgency in his voice. "There might be a pattern here," he said. "She's had placements before. We need to look into them, find out how they ended." The lawyer hesitated. "That's not always easy to prove, but I'll see what I can dig up." Eric hung up and went straight to Amara's school. He signed in at the office, walked down the hall, and peeked through the glass window of her classroom. She was sitting alone during free time, drawing again. This time, it wasn't a house or a tree. It was a car, small and bent-looking, parked on a street corner with a figure sitting beside it. He knew exactly what it was. Later that night, she asked, "If they take me, will you forget me?" Eric turned to her, his voice steady but full of emotion. "I couldn't forget you if I tried. But I'm not yours," she whispered. He crouched down in front of her, took her small hands in his. "You don't have to be born to someone to belong to them. You belong with people who choose you. I choose you, Amara, every single day." Her eyes filled, but she blinked fast to keep the tears from falling. She was still learning how to believe in permanence. A few days later, the lawyer called. "You're not going to believe this," he said. "We found 2 prior placements Tanya took in. One ended early due to a behavioral report, child welfare, flagged her for emotional detachment. The other, the kid asked to be removed." Eric felt a surge of hope, but he didn't let it get ahead of him. "Will it help?" "It's not a silver bullet, but if we can get statements or records, it strengthens our case." They worked nonstop that week. Phone calls, documentation, signed affidavits from the previous children's guardians. Every line of effort was exhausting, but Eric couldn't stop. He had no choice. This wasn't about winning, it was about protecting. The night before the hearing, Amara came into his room again. She didn't say anything, just climbed under the blanket beside him and rested her head on his shoulder. They stayed like that for a long time. No cartoons, no stories, just silence. And then, finally, she whispered, "I think you're my home." Eric didn't reply. Couldn't. He just wrapped his arm around her and held on. The courtroom the next day was sterile and cold, like most courtrooms are. Tanya sat across from them, neat and composed, answering questions with practiced calm. Her lawyer painted her as responsible, stable, and connected by blood. Eric felt the weight of the odds tipping until his lawyer presented the documentation, the flagged reports, the early removals, the statement from one of the guardians. Tanya Simmons followed the rules, but my son came home more distant than when he arrived. I didn't see warmth. I saw structure without heart. The judge leaned back, quiet for a moment, then looked at Eric. "You understand that foster care is temporary by nature," the judge said, "and yet you've petitioned to become this child's permanent guardian." "Why?" Eric didn't hesitate. "Because she's not just a child who needed a place to stay. She's a person who finally found someone who didn't leave. And I won't. Be the one to teach her that love is temporary." The courtroom went still. The judge looked down, scribbled something on the paper in front of him, then said the words that Eric would never forget. "Petition for permanent guardianship. Granted." Amara didn't react right away. She just looked at him, processing. Then she stood up, walked to him slowly, and in front of the judge, the lawyers, and the woman who had tried to take her away, she hugged him, tightly, fiercely, and, for the first time, Eric didn't feel like he was rescuing her. He felt like she'd rescued him too. Years passed, but Eric never forgot the weight of that courtroom moment. The second the judge granted him guardianship, and Amara's small arms wrapped around him like a child who finally understood what it meant to be chosen, not out of duty, but out of love. At first, things weren't perfect. Healing rarely is. Amara still had nights when she woke up sweating, heart racing, unsure of where she was. She still asked questions that no child should have to ask, like whether he'd ever leave, or whether she could call him Dad if she wanted. Eric never pressured her for anything. He just showed up, day after day, year after year. He showed her that he was real, that love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, softly, over time, until even the deepest wounds begin to close, and slowly the cracks in her world began to fill with light. She made friends. She started drawing again. Only this time, the people in her pictures had faces. They smiled, they stood close. Sometimes they even held hands. She joined the school art club, won a citywide contest. Eric had never seen her so proud. She held the ribbon like it was proof that she was no longer invisible. One afternoon, while they were walking home from a small exhibit where her latest painting had been displayed, Amara tugged at his sleeve and said, "You know what I realized?" "What's that?" Eric asked. "I used to think I was the one who got rescued, but maybe we saved each other." He stopped walking, just stared at her, heart full. Because she was right. Eric's life had been quiet before her, comfortable, predictable, but it had also been empty in a way he hadn't understood until Amara filled it with color and chaos and questions that made him feel more human than he ever had behind a desk. She taught him patience, courage, what it meant to love someone not because you had to, but because every part of you wanted to. 10 years after the day he found her on that sidewalk, they stood, together on another one, this time outside her high school graduation. She was taller now, her hair in curls, eyes bright and alive. She walked across the stage, accepted her diploma, and when she turned to find him in the crowd, she smiled. Later that night, as they sat together in the living room, just the two of them, like always, she handed him a small envelope. Inside was a card, hand-drawn, with simple words. "You weren't there when I was born, but you were there when I was reborn." Eric didn't say anything. He couldn't. He just held her hand and let the silence speak. Some stories begin in darkness, some on sidewalks, some in broken places where hope feels far away, but this story became a miracle, not because of what was fixed, but because of what was found. And sometimes what's found, against all odds, is family.